Welcome to this explainer. I am so thrilled you're here today because we're going to completely transform how you think about setting and actually achieving your goals. Look, if you've ever set a New Year's resolution only to just completely abandon it by February, you are definitely in the right place. Today, we're unpacking some brilliant insights from Thomas Alethea's book, 12 Steps to a Good Life. We're going to dig right into the granular psychology of why we succeed, why we fail, and how we can literally rewrite the script of our own behavior.
So why do our best intentions usually fail? It's a pretty painful question, isn't it? I mean, we tell ourselves we're finally going to get in shape, write that book, or get our finances in order. We start with this massive surge of motivation, but eventually we stumble. And what happens when we stumble? We blame our lack of willpower. We just beat ourselves up. But what if I told you that your past failures have absolutely nothing to do with the lack of willpower? The whole myth that sheer force of will is the answer, that is exactly why we get stuck in the first place.
Here's a quick roadmap of what we're covering today. First, the goal-setting trap. Second, the 800-pound gorilla. Third, approach motivation. Fourth, smarter goals. And finally, number 5, the daily reprieve. Let's get into it.
Okay, let's dive into Section 1, the goal-setting trap and escaping the willpower myth.
Society has totally conditioned us to believe that to change our lives, we just need to try harder. We rely on restriction, we white-knuckle our way through cravings, and we rely heavily on self-criticism the second we slip up. We basically try to whip ourselves into shape using words like should, have to, and need to. Well, Alethea points out that mindlessly doing the same things over and over through sheer effort is exactly like Sisyphus pushing his giant rock up a hill. He pushes that huge boulder all the way up, only to watch it roll right back down, day after day. It's the literal definition of insanity, and honestly, it's just an exhausting, miserable way to live. When you rely solely on willpower, you're trying to force change from the outside in, and it just doesn't work.
To understand why this willpower-only approach is doomed to fail, we've got to look deeper at our resistance. That brings us to Section 2, your unconscious 800-pound gorilla.
Think about this absolutely vivid metaphor from the book. Your conscious mind rides on the shoulders of an 800-pound gorilla. You're unconscious. You can make all the conscious commitments you want, right? You can write them in a journal, tell your best friend, set your alarm for 5 a.m., but if the 800-pound gorilla you're riding on wants to go right and you want to go left, well, guess who wins? The gorilla, every single time. Your unconscious mind is incredibly powerful, and it's evolved to keep you safe and comfortable, avoiding negative emotions at all costs. Basically, nothing changes until that gorilla agrees to the destination.
And the stakes for getting that gorilla on board, they are absolutely massive. A staggering 9 out of 10 people could potentially live to the age of 90 if they just made better lifestyle choices. To put that into perspective, totally preventable things like poor diet, physical inactivity, and smoking are what's holding us back. To actually hit these life-extending health goals, we absolutely must align our conscious desires with our unconscious drives. We need a brand new way to talk to the gorilla.
Now, what's really interesting about this next part is how we actually do that. Section 3, approach motivation, the core psychological shift.
This is where the real game changer happens. Basically, there are 2 different ways to frame any goal. First, you have avoidance motivation. That's when you're trying to run away from a negative outcome or a bad habit. Then you have approach motivation, which is when you're moving toward a positive outcome or a healthy lifestyle. Now, remember the gorilla? Your unconscious mind absolutely hates avoidance motivation. To the gorilla, it just feels like deprivation and fear. But it easily embraces approach motivation because that feels like growth and reward.
Let's look at a really granular psychological shift from the book to see this in action. Compare the goal of quitting smoking to the goal of living healthy. They seem similar, right? But if your goal is to quit smoking, what are you forcing your brain to think about literally all day long? Smoking. Every single time you remind yourself of your goal, you're triggering thoughts of the exact negative thing you're desperately trying to avoid. But if your goal is living healthy, your mind is focused strictly on positive habits. You're directing all your mental energy toward a positive outcome instead.
And this brilliantly illustrates why approach motivation is just so incredibly powerful. Approach goals focus entirely on the positive. Because of this, they drastically reduce that inner conflict with your unconscious mind. The gorilla isn't fighting you anymore. Because you aren't threatening to take away its comfort, you're actually offering it a shiny, new, better reward. This completely relieves the misery of self-criticism and helps build real, long-term resilience that's actually based on self-compassion.
So, how do we put this into practice? Let's move to Section 4, Setting smarter goals, a framework for success.
You've probably heard of standard SMART goals before, but Aletheia expands this into a structured framework called Smarter Goals. But keep in mind, it's not some magic formula. It's a checklist. It's meant to ensure your goals direct you toward those positive approach outcomes we just talked about, rather than avoiding negative ones, and to make absolutely sure they align with your actual values.
Let's break down how this builds across the acronym. The first three letters are specific, measurable, and attainable. Specific means using clear, simple statements that describe the positive values you're working toward. Measurable means you can actually track your steps with real numbers, like say saving $100 a month. And attainable? That just means keeping it realistic. This isn't about magical thinking. It's about setting targets you can genuinely hit with your current skills.
Moving right along, the next two letters are relevant and timely. Relevant is a massive one. Your goals absolutely must be tied to your own deeply held values, not expectations forced on you by society or your friends or your parents. If a goal isn't relevant to who you really are, the gorilla's going to sabotage it for sure. Timely means you need realistic deadlines. Saying you'll do something someday is pretty much a guaranteed recipe for failure. You need checkpoints to keep that momentum going.
Finally, the E and R that make this whole system so incredibly robust: evaluative and revisable. Evaluative means you are continuously checking in on your progress. Are you off track? Have your needs changed? And revisable means you stay fluid. If you miss a deadline, it's not a failure, okay? It's literally just a learning experience. You simply revise the plan and keep moving. This completely neutralizes that perfectionism trap that usually makes us quit after one tiny mistake.
All right, Section 5. Living one day at a time, the daily reprieve. This is where we bring all these lofty psychological concepts right down to earth.
So what is the daily reprieve? It's defined as breaking a habit or pursuing a goal for just one day at a time. Today. Think about it. If you look at a bad habit and tell yourself, I will never, ever do this again for the rest of my life, your unconscious mind instantly panics. It's way too overwhelming. But if you just say, you know what, I'm just going to skip this habit for today, your mind accepts it. Your battleground isn't the rest of your life. Your battleground is only today. Winning today is manageable, and it's incredibly freeing.
And to win today, you use this brilliant little tactic from the book, Ridiculously Small Changes Bypass the Resistance of Your Unconscious Mind. When you set a goal to do, say, a 3-minute workout, or literally just one single push-up, it seems almost silly to your conscious mind. And because it's so small, the 800-pound gorilla doesn't even bother putting up a fight. You slip right under the radar. But once you get down and do that one push-up, you're mentally free to do 10. These tiny, daily tasks build incredible long-term momentum.
So the crucial point we want to leave you with today is this. Are you running away from your fears, or are you moving toward your values? If you're tired of pushing that same rock up the hill, it is time to drop the whole willpower and self-punishment act. Frame your goals around positive approach motivation. Use that smarter framework to make them a reality, and trick your inner gorilla with those ridiculously small daily habits. You've got the tools now. The only question is, what small step will you take toward your values today? Thank you so much for exploring this with me on this explainer.